Welcome back. So I thought I would show you guys how to clean off the wheel if things go awry on your centered clay or just any piece in general. So we're using the wire cutters. You can wrap around your fingers just like dental floss, and then to take off the work that you don't want on there, slide it underneath the base, and then you can remove the clay, right? So this is still workable clay. It's a little bit soft because of all the water that was added into it, but this can be re-wedged and used again. So we can set that off to the side for now, and I'll show you what we do with that. To clean the wheel head, use your wood knife, kick the wheel on, and just slowly cut and remove all the excess clay that you don't need, right? So this clay is also can be used again, so put it with the wet clay that was non-successful. And to clean your wheel head off, using your large sponge, get a little bit of water on there. Voila, we're ready to go again. Right? So this is why I like using a sponge to clean my hands as opposed to a towel. A sponge you can wring out, right? All that clay goes into the bucket as opposed to in the towel and just gets gummed up, right? Sponge you can wring out easier than a towel, which is why I prefer sponges to towels. If you wipe your hands clean and then need to dry them off on a towel, that's what I recommend. But if you have a towel and if you're wiping clay off on your towel, then it just becomes a hot mess later. So use your sponge, wring it out, wipe off your hands. So for throwing a cylinder, a cup, we'll take you through the steps. So to show you a couple things, right? If, let's say, you don't quite adhere your clay ball to your wheel head and it slips around, you just kind of left with this guy spinning around like a top until you stop it, right? Then you're left with a little bit of a marred surface. Totally fixable, right? You pat it down. So that's why we want to make sure we add enough pressure to the wheel head that this can be adhered properly. And sometimes I'll hit my hand down on it, squeeze it, rock it back and forth to get it down in place. Sorry, my camera keeps sliding on me here. So now that is adhered to the wheel head, I can close that seam on the base with my finger, and we're ready to go again. Okay, so I took you guys through centering. I'm not going to take you through the steps like that quite as in-depthly. Centering is about the only time I will go as fast as I need. I used to center with a lot of speed. I don't do that anymore. I center with more focused pressure and control rather than speed. These wheels can go pretty fast. I rarely go full speed on the wheel. So this is full speed on the Shimpo. One thing I like to tell my students is speed kills, right? So if you go too fast, you are more likely to ruin your work than you are to save it. Okay, so my clay mound is centered. I feel pretty good about it. I want to have a nice mound of clay to open and pull up and work through those steps. Right, so we start with centering, and then we'll begin with opening. So opening, I like using my left thumb. I'll guide my thumb into center and then lightly press down. I'll support with my right hand and begin to open the form, right? Another way to open is with both thumbs, right? I suggest trying both. So if you open with both thumbs, find center, press down, and then lightly remove your fingers, right? The pressure that you add, you want it to be constant, and you want it to be slow. If you do things too quickly, what will happen is you'll get a spiral, and that throws everything all out of whack, right? If you open your clay mound off center, one part will be thicker and one part will be thin, and so you get like this weird accordion thing that goes around, and as you work, it'll be off center. And that'll happen, right? It's just things to be aware of when you're learning, when you're working on the wheel, right? So from here, I'll open. I always support my hands with pressure, so I use my left hand as a tool, and my right hand will come over the thumb, and I'll pull in towards my core, and I pull out just enough to where I get a really nice ridge on the top that's over the base here, right? I don't want to pull too far. If I pull too far, then it becomes a little bit harder to work into a cylinder. So from here, we can do a number of things. We can check the base to see how thick it is. So using your needle tool, poke down, and then use your thumbnail to mark where that needle goes down into. You can see how thick that bottom is. That's about how thin I ever want it to be, because we'll trim a foot and we'll take away about half that material. So this is a good base, right? We want our base to be about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch thick. And then all I'm doing right now is taking my sponge, smoothing out that base and sealing up that poked hole. So we have our clay mound that's opened. We're ready to start pulling upward. And this is where I'll move from the left side to the right side. Everything that I did centering was on my left side with my left hand. I opened with my left, and now I'll begin to pull up with my right. Right? That's where the main pressure will be. So, best way to think about this is squeezing the clay between your fingers and pulling up. Right? I will add more pressure on the outside than the inside, and I want to create a shape that is similar to a cone or a volcano. So adding pressure on the outside, you can see how that drives the clay upward. I'm adding more pressure on the outside. The inside is more of a guide. Right? My inside hand is just holding the clay in place and lightly squeezing. So my fingers together are like this. You notice I'm grabbing water, adding it to the sides and the insides with my finger because, again, this is the oil that is to the car engine. We need that viscosity between our hands and the clay to move the clay well. So again, adding that pressure down below, you can see that ridge that I'm creating with my finger. I'll add a little bit of pressure from the inside. You can see where that ridge is coming from. And I'll pinch that clay together. And move up. As I move up, the pressure I have on the clay becomes less. I have more pressure at the base because that's where most of the clay is. It's also attached to the base, so it's pretty sturdy. As I get to the top, you can see how little pressure it takes to move that clay, right? Same pressure added to the base, doesn't really move it. But this is totally fixable. Just a little bit of pressure, guided pressure, constant pressure. We'll go back into center, okay? So, again, adding more water to the inside and the outside. And eventually, you'll have to throw with your fingertips, right? So I can only put in a certain amount of my hand in my cylinder. So adding pressure on the outside, adding a little bit pressure from the inside, pinching together, and working upward. So this is going to be my last throw, just because I know where the clay is at. so I can get my whole hand. You can see how it stretches out the clay a little bit, right? So things to be aware of. If you're making a tall tumbler, you want to have enough space so that you can at least fit your hand in there, right? So I'll add that pressure on the base, pinch that clay together between my fingertips. You can see where I transition, right? When I get to the top, and this is just me, I can take my hands off, refocus, look at where that pressure is or where I stopped, that pull, and continue on. Right? So that's the basics of throwing a cylinder. So again, sponge, it really likes to take off that clay. So all that clay slip was on my hands is now gone. So taking this off the wheel, we're going to clean up the base a little bit. I have this wood knife. And how I hold this, it's like I hold a pencil, right? This is your writing portion of it. The blade here, I want it to cut into the clay body. So I'll have it ride right over the clay wall, and I'll begin to cut the base and remove that clay. So I'm removing the extra clay here, and then I'll take it to the wheel head and scrape that surface off and remove the clay like so, right? Takes practice. And again, you can clean it up a little bit more as you like. So you got the makings of a pretty nice tumbler, right? I'll let this stiffen up, and then I can trim the base. One of the last things that you want to do to your piece is remove the water from the base. Otherwise, you could cause a crack. So, taking that sponge, pinching it between your two fingers and squeezing it down there, depending on, you know, how narrow your cylinder is, right? So we want to take this off. So using your wire cutters, like dental floss, wrap it around your fingers, using your thumbs. Place your thumbs on the wheel head and just lightly pull through like that. Sometimes, if you notice the cylinder moved like that, the clay is light enough that it'll drag with the cutting of the wire tool. Okay? And just over here, I have a wood board that I'm going to place my cup on. So in removing this, you can do it a number of ways. You can grab your piece like this, but I want to keep the finger marks, hand marks off it as much as I can. How I like to do it, I'll have my thumbs at the base, my middle fingers at the front, and I'll lift up with my middle fingers, lift up with my thumbs, and then I can put it on my board, and I got plenty of other room to add cups and things like that. Right? So what I'm going to do right now is throw a cylinder without talking, without demonstrating, and you can just see the steps fluidly all together. Okay? So here we go. Okay, so there's the basics of throwing a cylinder. I will have a more in-depth demonstration of throwing a cylinder with a cup, or throwing a cylinder, shaping a cylinder, and then also making a bowl intentionally. That'll happen next week, and I'll demonstrate how to use those ribs for ceramics 2 then. Okay, so start here, guys. Send me any questions you may have through email. Up next is a quick demonstration on how I'd like you to clean. Okay?